This is Caribbean Vibes.
Sometimes I sit and wonder, do black people remember the message of dignity we got in 1917? Because that revolution changed the whole Caribbean. In every town and village, black people got the message. The message showed us the beauty of blackness. Yet some women still in them white stupidness, pressing up their hair, rouge and lipstick to waste, turning their eyebrows out of place. Oh yes, when you see these girls, you must smile, don't you fret. Their values are upset, they ain't get the message as yet. I am uncomfortable with our voice, my people. How long shall we continue to bathe in them white value? Some men are prepared to die wearing English coat and tie. Tchaikovsky, some men prefer rather than their Lord Kitchen. Some still like to work underneath a white cross. Do black people remember the message of dignity we got in 1917? Because that revolution changed the whole Caribbean. In every town and village, black people got the message. The message showed us the beauty of blackness. Yet some women still in them white stupidness, pressing up their hair, rouge and lipstick to waste, turning their eyebrows out of place. Oh yes, when you see these girls, you must smile, don't you fret. Their values are upset, they ain't get the message as yet. I am uncomfortable with our voice, my people. How long shall we continue to bathe in them white value? Some men are prepared to die wearing English coat and tie. Tchaikovsky, some men prefer rather than their Lord Kitchen. Some still like to work underneath a white cross. Some value their English knighthood and gold cross. Some feel proud when they marry a white lady. Some think Rastafarians nasty, nasty. If they dance playing soul music every set, don't fret, find a new fet. They ain't get the message as yet. Bum, 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 Zumba.
This is Caribbean Vibes.
We learned from the revolution, foreign things must come second. Yet some people still prefer hot dogs and hamburger or music festival. Imagine, it's still piano and violin. Teachers still teaching Shakespeare. Why not poems of Lord Superior? We learn to value our past and culture, whether it be Asian or from Africa. We learn that all blacks in this poor Caribbean share a common culture, where one culture makes us one. So when they ban short shirt from singing in effect, CDC acting like a jamet, they ain't get the message as yet. They like, oh, Jumba, Water and UC Guyana, innocently they suffer socialism. Some say no, some still hate Fidel Castro. To all these folks, brother man, let's stretch a helping hand, so that one day they will see the message of 1970. Awesome, I still call one another ugly. Some bow to the Queen as if she mighty. Some of our leaders in the Caribbean on black thinkers, they put a ban, they can't land. To them, Granger, Weeks, and Rodney is a threat. Their actions I regret. They ain't get the message as yet.
Oh yes, they ain't get the message as yet. Dr. Hollis Liverpool, the chalk dust. They ain't get the message as yet. The message of 1970, some of you are too young to remember 1970. I was a child. 1970, the Black Power Revolution in Trinidad. It actually started in 1968 when Walter Rodney was banned from Jamaica for wanting to teach African history. They didn't want him to teach it at a university, and so he went outside of the university into the communities and began to teach African history there. And it sent shivers. Imagine in 1968, independence come to the Caribbean, and in Jamaica, at the University of the West Indies, they're not teaching African history, and they don't want African history to be taught in a country that's 95, 96% African. Rodney goes out onto the streets, and he began to teach African history. And it sent shivers down the rulers in Jamaica. Of course, Rodney left in October 1968 to go to Montreal to a Black Writers Conference. And when he came back, he was prevented from landing in Jamaica. A Black Guyanese West Indian could not land in Jamaica, could not go back to Jamaica because he was teaching African history. Rodney was banned, and as we know, the rest is history. The students came out and they protested the banning. Guess who? Guess who was leading the student demonstrations? One, Dr. Ralph Gonzalez. He was the head of the student guild at the University of the West Indies. Then he was in the march. Patrick Manning was in the march because he was at UWI at the time. And of course, the rest is history. That, in a sense, formally begun the Black Power movement here in the Caribbean. Of course, the movement was started in the United States. One evening like today, they were tear gas. The marchers down in the south of the United States, they were tear gassed, and Stokely Carmichael Kwame took the microphone and said, as of today, all scared niggers are dead. What do we want? And the crowd said, Black power. By God, that was the beginning of that great movement in our Caribbean. 1968, it began with the banning of Walter Rodney. By 1970, students at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad are responding to the fact that they are locking up in Canada a set of West Indian students who found out that a professor was cheating, discriminating against Black students, and they took over the computer building. And of course, they eventually were arrested and put on trial. Dr. Joy Jagan, Chetty Jagan's son, was part of that movement, and the students in Trinidad at the university responded because the Canadian ambassador was going to visit the university, and they stood at the gate and prevented him from going in. And that began the demonstrations. The students would march. They would go down to the south of Trinidad and try to bring Indian Trinidadians into the march. And then the army mutinied. The Trinidad army at the same time mutinied. We now know that they had meetings with the Black Power leaders who were led by Geddes Granger, who later became known as Macandal Dagger. He was the student leader. And the soldiers, we understand, met with them and they mutinied. The Americans and the Venezuelans at the time sent gunships off the coast of Trinidad, and they put down the rebellion, and the Black Power leaders were arrested, charged, put before the court. They got off. Eventually, they got off. But that Black Power revolution was a seminal moment in our Guyanese, our Caribbean, and of course Guyanese history. There was a march in Guyana, and the marchers from Ascria, they marched in the office of the Prime Minister, and they asked Mr. Burnham if Rodney were to come to Guyana, whether he would be banned. And Mr. Burnham said no. So we didn't have the taste of the Black Power Revolution here in Guyana in terms of demonstrations, but the impact of the revolution. And that's what Chalk Dust is singing about in that calypso, the message of 70, the message of 1970. And I remember as a boy hearing that calypso, and you feel nice because you heard Guyana name in the calypso, and you heard Rodney name, and these are Guyanese. I remember Ken Cosby had a program called Nightline, and Nightline, and and he would play that calypso. We understand Mr. Burnham called one day and tell them, don't play that calypso. Burnham was a 3 cents man, because by then he and Guyana had broken and so on. So that history of the Black Power Revolution. And there's a reason I played that calypso, because tonight we're going to be talking to someone who knows a lot about the Black movement, who knows a lot about Black thought, who knows a lot about Black narratives. Recently, we heard from our brothers across the aisle who've been talking about narratives. And they pinned down this quote-unquote Black narrative as a kind of anti-Indian thing. What we Black leaders do is we against Indian people, or, we against the government. And our Black narrative is broader than that. Broader than that. In fact, I am arguing that of all the racial groups in the world, the group with the broadest and the most profound narrative is the African narrative. And it has to be because of our experiences, not because we're better than anybody. And so the Black narrative is as varied. You heard Chalk Dust there with part of the Black narrative, a self-criticism. Very few groups have a narrative that criticize themselves. Douglas is criticizing Africans for still, after the Black Power Revolution, preferring white things than black things, bowing before the Queen, wearing suit and tie, and so on. Part of the black narrative is self-criticism. Very few groups in the world do that, criticize their own. Douglas is doing that as part of our narrative. Some still hate socialism and hate Fidel Castro. There's a black socialist narrative. In fact, black thinkers are arguing that socialism is embedded in the black experience, the experience of communalism. I was making the point last week, you all know, that there is a black entrepreneurial narrative. Our own Marcus Garvey was very big on entrepreneurship. And you read Garvey, you study Garvey, the epitome of entrepreneurship. The UNIA, Garvey organization, own laundromat, own this, own that. The Black Star Line, where ships were trading between the Caribbean, Africa, and the United States. Black entrepreneurship. And yet they tell us that black people can't do business, black people can't this. We do business different. As a small boy, as small girls, you all know, if you all go to the shop, the black shopkeeper, your 5-cent short, he give you the thing. It's not black capitalism. Our entrepreneurship is a community entrepreneurship. The black businessman is not going to see the black woman go hungry, the black child go hungry. You see, all right. We're going to learn some things tonight. They throw around terms like Pan-Africanism without knowing what it means. You know? As if it's when someone says you're a Pan-Africanist, it's as if you're on the fringe, as they would say. You know? But we're going to be talking with Brother Gerald Pereira tonight. I see Gerald in other programs, as I told him, and I see him struggling to really express himself because they don't understand him. One of the problems in our society is that as ethnic groups, we don't understand one another. I mean, we see one another, black people eat curry, Indian people hide and eat black pudding. Small boy, you see them Indian shop, they come, they buy the black pudding in the village, they wipe them out and they go back home and so on. We eat each other food and so on. But in a profound way, we don't understand each other because our education system does not facilitate that. But we're going to talk about what is black, what is the black narrative, what is black thought? Because you see, the thought are from the narrative. And then the thought informs the narrative. What Guyana call, we as scholars and activists and artists, we take the people's experiences, refine them, and give them back to the people as cultural and political nourishment. Gerald Pereira knows a lot about those things. There is a reason that many, if not many, most of the black activists in the United States during the Harlem Renaissance, in the Caribbean, in Africa, gravitated to Marxism, to socialism. And there is a reason. There's a reason when our people came to the West, dragged across the Middle Passage, and they encountered Christianity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. They say, oh, Jesus Christ. Well, they didn't say, oh, Jesus Christ, because they didn't know Jesus Christ. But they came from a place of plenty gods. God for rain, God for sun, God for water, God for this. So when they see this Father, Son, Holy Ghost. They took to it. It reminded them of their own multifaceted religion. That is why, till up to now, them lady go to church Sunday, but during the week they still do their spiritual thing. We in academia, we call it syncretism. But really it is the breadth of the African cosmos, the breadth of the African worldview. It's not a narrow worldview. People try to narrow us. The African worldview is a broad worldview. It has to be, and not there, humanity start. It has to be a place that is looking with a broad gaze to the world. But they try to ghettoize us. But we aren't taking that. We aren't taking that. Let me bring in my guest tonight. Here we go. Brother Gerald, good night.
Good night, my brother. That's a beautiful introduction there, man. I love what you said. That is excellent.
Well, I hear they call you.
That is excellent.
Thank you very much, my brother. I learned from you all, the elders, and I usually tell my students that by the time I got to university, I had a full education because I was lucky enough to be a child of the 60s and the 70s and beyond, and you couldn't miss. I know you understand that very well. You are usually go ahead.
And also being around a remarkable human being.
Oh yes.
UC Guyana, Elder UC Guyana. My brother, if throughout my life I can say some of the human beings I've encountered, and if you say 5 persons throughout my lifetime, Elder Guyana is there. So full of humility. A real sage,
Yeah, and thank you very much, Gerald, for talking about Guyana in that. When we heard in the Calypso there,
yes.
I just talk about UC Guyana suffering, our saint, if we can borrow from the Hindus, our Gandhi. Of course, we black people will say Gandhi is the black Guyana. You say Guyana is the black Gandhi. But every generation, some group of people, some individuals come along, and they make the path easier for us to see through.
Yeah.
They're not God, all right? Guyana is not God, all right? Guyana was part of a tremendous generation of Caribbean and African men and women.
Yes.
In our own country, and I used to tell me, look, one of the problems with Guyana is that Guyana, a small country, small population, had to accommodate a Guyana, a Burnham, a Martin Carter, a Cheddy Jagan, all of them in one generation.
And a Walter Rodney.
And she said, Guyana is too small for that kind of intellect that it has thrown up. And that is why a lot of them left Guyana, went onto the world stage and played pivotal roles on the world stage. And so
look at the young Caroods that wrote Christopher Columbus and the Rape of Paradise. Ivan Van Sertima. George M. James that wrote Stone Legacy. Dr. Peter Millard, who helped organize the Pan-African Congress, Ras McConnell, who was from Buxton.
That's right.
Griffith, yes.
Yes, Mr. Griffith, Ras McConnell.
McConnell from Buxton.
From Buxton, Buxton front. His family was there. They're still there. He's the man that financed a lot of the Pan-African meetings.
Correct.
He owned restaurants there in Manchester. Yes.
Back to the entrepreneurial spirit that you were talking about.
Exactly.
But you're right. there, there is this tendency, and a lot of the orthodox Marxists are to blame for this, that when you speak about socialism, it's anti-business and nothing to do with entrepreneurship. No. When you look, you spoke about the African socialism the last time. When you look at the philosophy of Ubuntu, Ujama, and this whole thing about collective worker responsibility, the African is a very communal being. This concept of the rugged individual is alien to the African ethos and tradition. And you mentioned about this board, what they have now, about this type of prosperity theology, this westernized Christianity, especially in its evangelical and Pentecostal form, that has imprisoned our people's mind, and bringing alien spirits. You see, brother, people speak about a human being being possessed by an alien spirit, an evil spirit, and you have to exorcise that spirit. In the same way, as Africans, we have to get rid of alien ideologies and those things that, many of these theories of, when you examine, you read about Freud and all of these people, many of them sound good, but when you look at the period that influenced all of these these great, what I refer to as the great European thinkers, all the products of that European period that they call the Enlightenment. I call it the so-called Enlightenment, because all as well as I do, that the philosophers of the so-called European Enlightenment were all racist. They didn't think much of the African. And that's why Claude actually...
Mr. Hegel, who influenced Mr. Marx.
That's right.
He was at the top.
Africa's outside Africa made no contribution to history. Yes. But you said something so much which I agree with. I think it was about 16 years ago. It was all on TV, CBS, and all these white people were saying, well, Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam, said many, many years ago that the black man and woman are the original people of the earth. And people turned up their nose, and so, including many of our people. But then, 15 years ago, some white scientists were doing research, and they were able to identify a gene, and they found that this gene exists in every ethnic group and racial group, including the Inuit people, what we call the Eskimos and all of that. But it is more dominant in the African. And these white scientists arrive at their position that it shows that all the races came out of the African. Now, all the messengers, all those who brought the monotheistic faiths, Abraham, Jesus, Prophet Muhammad, these were people who looked like me and you. And I tell the brothers, there's an excellent book by Wesley Muhammad, who's a scholar in Near Eastern languages, and so it's called Black Arabia. That Arabia was part of Africa, yes. And the original Arabs were dark-skinned Africans. But then you had the movement; other people came, and they got Arabized. They were Arabized by the black Arabs. It was not the other way around. And I think some of the Arab supremacists who believe they have or think they have more in common with the Europeans, that's why they hated Gaddafi, because Gaddafi told them that, hey, these people went here before all of you. And if you don't want to identify with your Africanity and was African, then you should leave the continent. Go to Europe. But what you said, about they believe that, if you speak about socialism, you're anti-private enterprise. And so, no. Capitalism and private ownership are not synonymous. They're not the same. I mean, the Europeans traded in captured Africans. Is that the type? That was private enterprise. That was business. But can we condone that? And that led me, we know, as Walter Rodney pointed out, in How Europe Want to Develop Africa, and even Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery,
yes,
and other books, that the trade in captured Africans provided the material basis for the kickstart of capitalism.
Yes.
Yeah. And today you have people talking about racialized capitalism. The Indian and their experience, you know, I am still to see, and you speak about the African narrative. When you look across the Caribbean, I am still to see the Indian equivalent to CLR James, to Walter Rodney, to Padmore, or any one of them. I think even if you look in the Marxist tradition, the Marxist thing, other than I know of only Chedi Jagan in the Caribbean. And then if you look at Guyana years back, you will see you had Ranjit Chandy Singh, who was, you know, he was very in-depth. He understood the classics. But you have not seen that type of critique of capitalism that Walter Rodney brought or the others brought. And so when you listen to some, I listened to some of the people who advance the Indian narrative, and they do it when you read between the lines. I must say you cannot escape that there is that element of supremacy that comes out. Mm-hmm. You know, because they keep talking about, oh, this one we worked hard and we were frugal and we saved and all of that. But, you know, my dad used to say something. He used to say, I like the way he used to put it. He said, you know, you don't have to, when you look at the people who get wealthy, it's not hard work. He said, if hard work used to make people wealthy, he said black people would have been the wealthiest people on the planet.
Oh, yes.
He said that. I mean,
your father tell them wasn't an African.
Yeah, no, he was Portuguese. But he had because his father had from his my great grandmother's side had African.
Right.
But he said that, and you know, these are things we need to understand, and we know that when you know how the system was rigged. Colonial capitalism, the entire state was rigged in such a way, and it made life difficult for the African. The flooding of the villages, the people, the land and everything and all of that. And people, that's how many of them moved off and went into the hinterland to do pork knocking and all of that. But it has never been across the Caribbean. It has always been rigged to keep out, you know, the African from meaningful participation in the economy. Yeah. And I think a person who understood that and attempted and did a lot to shift that in favor of the poor and the dispossessed and empower Africa, Forbes Burnham, he understood that. But you know, there was so much happening at the time, and I want to make this clear. You know, I'm one of those persons who I can see the great contribution that Burnham made, and I can love and admire Burnham's vision and what he represented, and I can love and admire Walter's vision, what Walter represented. It's not a contradiction. There's nothing contradictory about it. You know, Kwame Ture said, when white people have differences, they call it democracy and pluralism. But when we have differences as Africans, you see them, they can't unite, they teach each other. You know, that is how they frame it. Now, I can recall, since we're talking about that, I can remember when Walter returned to Guyana. I went to in those days, they had these, people would invite you to what they call house parties. And I think it was at the late Dr. Monroe. I think he was a scientist, but also a lay preacher. and Walter was there with his wife and so, and we ended up in a discussion, and he turned to me and said, look, I am starting some study classes. This was in South, where he resided at the time. Brian Rodway used to reside in the same house, and I used to be up in the street. So he said, I will invite you to the classes. So I went to the first discussion and was good. And the only person I can recall being there was Elder Clive Thomas' wife at the time was there. Alice, she was there. Yes. I remember she turned up. And the person who brought the message to me saying that Walter said that you must come, he's ready to start, was a woman by the name of Roberta Kilkenny.
Yes. She
was married
to Louis Kilkenny, and she came and taught at the University of Guyana.
That's right. Yeah. So when this thing about Walter started and all that, I was in the PNC in the YSM, and so, and I know that there were people in the YSM who were saying, no. Walter should be given the job at the university, and in this country, you have two positions. There are those who put Burnham up as though he's infallible, and then you have those, on the other hand, who demonize him, that he made no contribution. Good. Now, Burnham, as a human being, made, of course, all of us make mistakes. There was a lot of mistakes that were made, and I think they had other ways that we could try to resolve those contradictions and so. But of course, there were other forces that were pushing it. But why I'm mentioning this to you is, at that time, when they had all this surveillance and all of that, I would go straight up to the WPA office in Charlotte Street, upstairs, Kroll Street, and sit down there and have a chat with Elder Koyano. And the special branch would be over the road at the shop. I wasn't interested. I didn't care. But this was the type I wanted to see, that unity. That was the unity I would have liked to see. You imagine if we had built that?
Yeah. And your point is well taken. I often tell the story when the APNU was formed by the WPA and the PNC.
Yeah.
And Dr. Rupnarayan and I would go on Sundays to West Bobis and, go into the villages and meet people. And all the people, would say, "Bye, me thank you for farming this APNU thing. I will now not have to choose between Burnham people and Guyana people."
Mm-hmm.
With tears in their eyes.
Yes.
And I remember Rupert, who is not the most emotional person, but became so emotional. And, when we were driving back, he said to me, you do your politics. We do what we think is correct, what we think is politically correct. But we do not know sometimes what impact it's having on ordinary people.
Correct.
And that's splitting between Guyana and Rodney on the one hand and Burnham on the other hand.
Yeah.
It had impact. I saw it in my own village, Buxton, right? Yes. Where people, in a sense, had to live double lives.
Yeah.
They're loyal to Guyana, who is their sage.
Yeah.
And they're loyal to Burnham, who is governing the country and who they see as the Black Hope. Yeah. And I grew up seeing them having to fight those two things and so on. Mm-hmm. Didn't have a sense of it, how profound it was until I grew older. And one PNC person who we used to give hell in the village towards the end of our life. She would meet me and she would say, "My best time in politics is at 5:30 on Sunday afternoon on Channel 9. Of course, that's when Walter Rodney Grung this down. This is an old PNC person. What I'm saying is that the point you are making, that we African people, African Guyanese and African people are not the people who, while we are given to unity, we are critical. We critique capitalism, but we also critique socialism and Marxism.
Yes.
George Patmore
Yeah.
Pan-Africanism or communism.
Communism, correct.
right.
Yeah.
C.L.R. James,
That's
who
right.
very early broke with Stalinism and
Yes.
critiqued Stalinism. So
Yes.
while we are a united people, we are not blindly united. We are self-critical.
That's
You
right.
know, sometimes, as I say, to our chagrin, because sometimes we raise the bar so high for our leaders, they can't climb over.
Yeah.
Right. You know, but I want to talk to you, Gerald, about what's happening in Guyana today. We have all the
Just
different
before you go on, David, I just want to
Yes.
say this. And
Yes.
that's why when the OVP, Organization for the Victory of the People, we ran
That's
in
your
2015.
organization.
Yeah, we ran in 2015 and 2020 at the regional level. And we told people, we said, look, y'all can vote for APNU, give them the presidential vote, but give us the regional vote. Give us the regional vote, because we understood that, what you were talking about when you went into the villages and the people said, well, you know, and we wanted that. We understood that.
And thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening in Guyana, because we are now a petro state.
Yeah.
We remain an ethnically divided society. For obviously the what they call the accident of history, the way in which our people came, the circumstances in which Africans came, Europeans came, Indians, Chinese, Portuguese came. It meant that we are always on a collision course because of the European divide and rule system. But you mentioned to me when we had a brief chat that you see a lining up of European capital, white capital, and Indian capital. I want you to expand on that, because about a year ago, I heard critic, who's a person I don't call his name on this program, but I heard him making an analysis of what's going on in Guyana, and he said, "You know what you're seeing there? It's Indian greed, you know. Indian greed. He call it Indian greed." Now, he is part of the story, right? But I was taken aback. I mean, in his own raw way, all right? He was talking about the movement of Indian capital. So I want you to talk about what's happening in Guyana now and what you see as the fusion there, or the merging of Indian capital and white European capital.
Yeah. Well, you know, David, if you go back, you know, to the days of when Mr. Hoyt became the president of this country, and the IMF and the World Bank imposed neoliberal economics on this country. It was imposed. And we were told there were what you call the structural adjustment program, right? Or the ERP, the Economic Recovery Program.
Coming from the IMF and the World Bank.
Yes, or what they call the Washington Consensus.
The Washington Consensus.
Yes. And they started to privatize, sell out state assets, you know, Guyana Timbers, that was sold for next a song to Lord Beaverbrook. The ink didn't dry properly. And I know some of the players in that. And he sold that thing for a huge sum. I can remember Barney Grant, who was alive then, Guyanese roots in Britain, who was a member of the Labour Party, and others, they were saying, look what a member of the Conservative Party did to Guyana, ripped off Guyana. Anyhow, we sold out Sonata Textile Mill, and you know who bought that? You know, the textile mill.
Right.
Yes. Right. The Guyana Times is published there now. And they had to downsize the army and the public service. So when you downsize the army, which ethnic group is going home? Which racial? Africans. When you downsize, start to trim the public service, Africans are going. When you privatize state assets and start to sell off state assets, sell off state property and so, who had the money to buy it? Not Africans. And that was bought by elements of the Indian capitalist class in Guyana. They bought that. So I think when Chedi Jagan became president, I know for a fact that he was reluctant to carry on with this thing, because he himself recognized that, and it is said, I will repeat, that he knew that if you just sell off, he knew who would be in the position to buy it. And he was somehow reluctant to pursue it, to carry it on. And I think they said that he put Polydor in some commission so that Polydor, Polydor was a socialist.
Joseph Polydor, the
Joseph
General
Polydor from
Secretary of
the
TUC.
General Secretary of the TUC. And the rest is history. And at a particular period, this neoliberalization and this thing about everything around the private sector and the private sector and the private sector was pushed by the present vice president. He pushed that. So we hear this mantra that they've been singing all over the world, and they sing it in Guyana. They're singing it, that the private sector is the engine of growth, and the private sector going to build country and private sector. Well, David, you're a social scientist, and you would have done, your history, because that's your raw material. There are two things they cannot identify. One, name me any country on planet Earth that private sector build. Private sector is not in the business of building nation. That is not the role of the private sector. The state has to be meaningfully involved in the economy. And we have some people, including some of the Indian rights activists, they like to point to Singapore. But they don't. Lee Kuan Yew was a very ruthless man. Lee Kuan Yew had he had no room. He did not tolerate dissent and opposition. He jailed people. He repressed the trade union movement and everything. So we know, for example, that if you want to build capitalism, you can build capitalism, and you don't have to have democratic institutions to do that or allow democracy. They don't go together. They're not synonymous, right? And in this country, you push this, you privatize, you say, but you sing in this mantra that the private sector is the engine to grow the private sector. And what is the private sector doing? We're seeing in this country that the gap between the have and the have-nots have widened. And those who are rich are getting richer. And now that we are an oil and gas producing country, we've seen that Exxon and those who, the corporations that are operating in Guyana they have a nexus now. There's this nexus between them, and you have certain big companies, big business owned by elements of the Indian capitalist class that are working with them. You have this, I think, the shore base, and you have other companies and so on. Some of them we've seen. I know of one case where 3 wealthy families, their descendants got together and formed a company that was looking at their what you call the shore base. I think it's over at Wales or somewhere in the other side. Yeah. So this is the reality that we have in Guyana, and what you're witnessing is white monopoly capital, the Exxon and those who are coming in the country. Omai is back here. Omai carried away a lot of gold out of this country and said that they didn't make a profit. So maybe they were running a charity, but they're back. And you have other companies, and they're rooting the hell out of the wealth of this country, the gold, our oil and gas, and it's being facilitated. I mean, I just read today where the government of Guyana paid so much in taxes for Exxon. Now, under President Burnham's watch, that would not have been possible. That couldn't happen. Burnham was a patriot. Burnham was a nationalist. You could imagine Mr. Routledge or any one of them in this country attempting such nonsense with Forbes Burnham. It was impossible. Burnham stood up in the national park and said to the US ambassador, "Your son of who ain't cut your coat." And the man got up and walked out. And the last time I know that I always say that this country had some semblance of independence and sovereignty is up to when Burnham was alive.
Brother
Our
Gerald,
sovereignty and independence is on paper. But what we are seeing, David, in this country is the merger. We are seeing the cooperation, this nexus, this bond between the foreigners, white capital, and the Indian capitalist class in this country. They own tremendous land. They have tremendous wealth. They're in mining. They're in forestry. They're in quarrying. They're in everything. Aviation or what have you. So the economy now is just in the hands of a few. And once you have the key to any country being, if you're to judge it, what you mean by democracy, you can have this thing where every 5 years we go into a polling station and put an X. And then you come away. But look at it. You might change the party, but look, it doesn't change those who control, those 16 families that control tremendous land and wealth in this country. We don't change that. And that is not good for the masses of this country, for the poor Indians, who many are suffering, and for Africans, for our people. Because the system is rigged. The system is rigged. And we can talk about democracy and all of that. And that is utter rubbish. Utter rubbish. Because at the end of the day, meaningful democracy, to have that, you will have to speak about democratization of the economy. Too much of our country's wealth and resources is concentrated in the hands of a few. Yes, that few, today we're seeing it. It's the white monopoly, white capital that is in the country, and that Indian capitalist class.
Brother Gerald Pereira here tonight. In case you're just joining us, we're talking about a range of issues and trying to make sense of our country as we go through this period, this defining period in our history. Just want to make a couple of very clear points here. You know, I'm very glad that Gerald has talked about Indian capitalism, because some of the guys across the place there think that when we critique the government, we are criticizing Indian people.
No.
When we,
you're right.
Which can be no fun. Part of the African Caribbean narrative is that black power, our black power in the Caribbean, Walter Rodney adumbrated.
Yeah.
Our black power must include Indians.
Correct.
He brought a class perspective to black power, right? So the African narrative has always had a place for our Indian brothers and sisters.
You're absolutely right. But even before Brother Walter returned, Makandal Dago probably get his green show, and Dave Darbo, who's today Brother Kafra Kambon. They were in NJAC, National Joint Action Committee. And there were Indian members in there.
That's right. And they marched down to
and they marched through Koroni. And Bades Maraj, who was a reactionary, an Indian supremacist, the sugar workers marched past, joined the Black Power uprising, and marched past shouting insults at Bades at Maraj. So you're right.
Yeah, we want to make that clear. The African narrative was always
in the Caribbean context. The African narrative always included the Indian as part of the Black Power. That's
always
true.
me. To this day, I mean, people may not agree with power sharing and shared governance, but it is no accident that the most of the proponents of power sharing are African Guyanese, because it comes out of that long tradition of part of the African narrative is living with our brothers and sisters of other
Absolutely, you're right.
In equality. So, yeah.
You're right. Now, you would be aware of this. Do you know Mahmoud Mamdani?
Yes.
And Issa Shiv Jai.
Yes.
Those were Indians. Those are Indian scholars who born in Africa.
In Africa, Kenya,
and
Uganda.
They were part of the Dar es Salaam school.
With Walter?
With Walter.
Yeah.
And I met two Indians, prominent Indians in Africa, who were Pan-Africanists. One by the name of Gura Ibrahim, who was General Secretary of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Tanzania that was founded by Robert Sobukwe.
That's right. That's
who
right.
spent years in jail, but you don't hear about Sobukwe, you only hear about Mandela. And there's a reason for that. And then then there was Karim Isaac. Karim Isaac, who was a Pan-Africanist. Gore Ibrahim represented the PAC. He was General Secretary, and he represented PAC as the ambassador in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, because Saddam Hussein, the party government, used to help the Pan-African Congress get them scholarships and train their fighters and so
yes, and of course there's a black political party now in Iraq where black people like me and you right? After Obama got elected, they formed their own party, and people didn't know there were black people like me and you.
That's right. Well, that goes back to the original Arabs who were black Arabs that we're talking about. Correct. Exactly. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So you're right. And you read Mahmoud Mamdani and Issa Shiv Jai and these people, and they're part of that. And so, the African narrative of always being clear on that. And one of the points I want to make is this. People say when you talk about black power, oh, he's racist, he don't. No. This is what they do. Now, you cannot. The people who talk about black racism, no, there is prejudice. Prejudice and racism are two different things.
Yes.
We know this.
No, a lot of people don't know it.
Well, they have to know before they
explain it. Please explain it.
Yeah, well, I don't have, if a white man doesn't like me, or an Indian doesn't like me, or somebody doesn't like me, that's their business.
That's right.
Right? But it becomes a problem for me when that prejudice is able to institutionalize itself. In other words, you get prejudice plus power.
There you go.
Then you get racism. So if the white man doesn't like me, India doesn't like me, that's his business. But when he is in possession of state power, then he could decide whether I can eat, live, die, or have a job.
Mr. Pereira.
Now,
please repeat that formulation. Please repeat it, because a lot of Indian brothers and sisters are on this program, and that may be surprising to you, but a lot of Indian brothers and sisters are on this program. Please repeat that formulation.
Yeah, as I said earlier, if a white man doesn't like me or an Indian doesn't like me, that's their business. I'm not looking for anybody to love me. I start with loving myself as an African who I am, and from a great tradition and civilization. But where it becomes a problem is when that prejudice is able to institutionalize itself. In other words, those who are prejudicial get state power. Mm-hmm. So racism is prejudice plus power. So when you have state power, then you can decide whether I would live, have a job or not. Then that is the problem. Then I will take you on. Then it becomes worrying for me. There is no country on planet Earth. There is no country on planet Earth where black people hold political, economic, and military power and use it against other races. Name one.
Talk to me.
Look in Zimbabwe. Look in Zimbabwe when it was Rhodesia. Ian Smith killed many black people. And yet when Mugabe came into office, when the ZANU-PF came into power, Ian Smith was living on his farm 100 kilometers away from Harare, abusing Mugabe, attacking Mugabe. If it was the other way around, Mugabe would have been executed. Here was a man, Ian Smith died of natural causes.
You see, Gerald, I'm so glad that we are talking about this because I think it was Ravidev who asked me.
I don't know what's black racism.
Yeah. There's black prejudice. All of us know that. We know that there are prejudices against Indian people, prejudices against Amerindian people. Yes. I grew up, you grew up here, they always talk about Bokam people. Mixture of black and Amerindian Bokam people. So we black people are the people. And the Amerindians are Bok, meaning they are not people. So there is black prejudice. Black prejudice against Indians, black prejudice against Amerindians, black prejudice against black people. There is black prejudice.
Based on shade and tear.
Thank you very much.
Yes, right? You're right.
But when that prejudice is now manifested in military power, economic power, and political power, then is when it moves to racism.
That's right.
You know? And let me say, you know, Burnham had plenty sins, as you say.
Yes.
You don't have to agree with me, Gerald. I think Burnham was autocratic. But Ram said shades of autocracy. That old generation that brought us, that crossed the sea and brought us out of bondage. From Burnham to Eric Williams to Gary, and we name all of them, to Jagan, all of them had shades of autocracy. Here we go.
I agree. I would not go against that. To go against that is to be intellectually dishonest.
That's right. But
right? You're right. That is, you have to see the period.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
That's right.
You're right.
The people tell them they were God.
Yeah.
The people say to them, you are our Joshua.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
They in turn internalize
it. Correct.
That worshiping. So we have to put this thing in perspective.
Yeah. Yep. You're right.
But here is Burnham in 1979. When the IMF and World Bank came to him with structural adjustment, he said, not me. That is a recipe for riot.
For riot.
Right?
And you can take your money and put it where the monkey put the nuts.
Can you imagine a Jack Dior or Finale saying that today?
Never.
No, never. They come out of a different... So I am making a distinction here, as you are doing, between the Indian capitalist bourgeoisie class and the Indian people, the Indian masses.
Big difference.
Big difference. We're making. I am further making a distinction between the Rois and the Ramutars and others in the PPP who come out of a different era, who would frown on that Indian capitalist. I'm making a distinction between them and Jack Dio and Ali and so on. It's what we call political upbringing.
Yes.
Now, I have great disagreements with Donald, great disagreement with Roy, but the one thing I am certain is that they will only put their X next to that Indian triumphalist capitalism if you put a gun to their heads. And I usually tease them and say, "But you all get gun to your head," right?
I agree with you.
But I don't think that this merging of Indian capital with Indian political power and that Indian supremacist ideology that the devs and them bring, I think that's the dangerous brew. The Indian supremacy that Dev and them bring, the Indian capital class that has captured the heart of the PPP, right? And that whole notion that the nation, the country, is really not a place where you neighbor stringberry, but a place where you transact, where you do transaction. So as they did during the Atlantic slavery, where foreign capital comes in and you sell your mother-in-law, your daughter-in-law, and your father-in-law. We are in the face of that. And as African people, because we went through that experience way back on the Middle Passage,
that's right.
That's right. And see it quicker than other groups.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
You know, they talk about globalization.
Yes.
Look, this is what we're calling globalization. Is the latest phase of globalization.
That's right. It started, I think it was Samir Amin or Ali Mazrui. It started since Vasco da Gama went to Rome, and this is a phase. It started when they went into Africa and captured it up. Yes, it started.
That's right.
It's just and it's just what we are calling globalization. It's just another name for imperial.
Yes, Professor Nettleford said it's a new name for an old designation.
That's right. That's right. He's right. Well, Rex was a champion.
Yeah. I mean, African labor,
yes,
Native American land, and European greed, is what that old slavery thing was.
That's right.
As Eric Williams argued, is at the basis of European capitalism.
That's right. But you know, David, at the opening of the Carry Fest in Barbados a number of years ago, in the 80s, the one in the early 80s, George Lamin spoke at the opening. And he was talking about, he touched on different things. And he said, I'll never forget this. He said the African in his own self-emancipation will emancipate all humanity.
Yeah. You're coming from the bottom where they shoved us.
Yeah.
And so when we rise, everybody we are raising.
Yeah, that ethos. It's amazing, and that is what we need our people to understand those things. They need to. There's a lot to be done.
Gerald, this storm, I hear of some of our mutual friends describe you as the most enduring Pan-Africanist. And when I listened to it, I said, do these people understand what Pan-Africanism is, what Pan-Africans mean?
Yeah.
Do they really understand? Talk to our audience here. Tell us what Pan-African, because as you know, I teach this stuff. So one has to explain Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, Black power, and all these concepts that
I think it's wrong. When you say a Black nationalist, people just think all sorts of negative. I don't pay attention to it. But you're right. For some people, Pan-Africanism, I don't agree. Pan-Africanism is not an ideology. You can see it as a philosophy if you want.
Yes.
But it's also, as Kwame Ture and them said, an objective that we...
That's right. That's right.
And Kwame Nkrumah in Class Struggle in Africa and Handbook of Guerrilla Warfare, as well as in his book Consciencism.
Yes.
That Pan-Africanism is the total unification of Africa, and it includes Africans in diaspora under scientific socialism. Now, people say, well, scientific socialism and Marxism is the same. No. Nope. We don't. Marx made a contribution to socialist thought. It's like Kwame Ture always pointed out that Newton observed something with the laws of gravitation. He did, but he didn't discover something. He didn't discover it. So Marx observed certain things, and what he observed in capitalist society, and the whole thing about surplus value and how the capitalists get it, and so on and so forth, and showing exploitation, how the capitalist is able to exploit the worker. He observed certain truths. But as you pointed out last time, socialism existed and was practiced in Africa long before Marx and Engels. Gaddafi once said, he said, we are socialists. Our revolution is a socialist revolution. He said we didn't have to wait on Marx and Lenin to tell us about socialism. He said the Quran has socialism in it. The Bible in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, there is socialism in there. If you are looking for the moral and ethical basis of socialism, it's in the Quran and in the Bible. The African tradition, right back to ancient Kemet. David, do you know, I've been to parts of Africa where a man is sitting with his meal wrapped up, and he's looking after his goats, and he will wait until someone is passing by to share the meal with him. Right? Invite them, come and have something with me. To eat, to sit and eat by yourself in certain African areas, it's not the right thing to do. So he's there waiting that someone will pass by and say, oh, come and join me, have some food. I'm just showing you that to sit and eat. And I'll show you what they do. They have these huge basins. They do it at weddings and gatherings and other things, graduation. They would fill this huge basin with food. And 5, 6 of us will sit around this basin. And you have a spoon, and each of us have a spoon, and we're eating out of the same, this big container with food. And 6 of us are eating out of it. That's very symbolic.
Yes,
you know that the individual does not exist. The individual, the community makes individual. So the African never speaks of the individual, he speaks about the person. So you get this concept of African personalism.
Yes. Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And I always community.
Yes. Yes. I always tell
it's important. Now look at the superiority of African culture and civilization. You know the Xhosa people in Zulus.
Right.
In those days, there was no prison to lock up anybody. It's the Portuguese go and build prison in Angola when they arrived on the shores in Africa, when they invaded Africa. So how did you deal with what modern sociologists will call social deviance? Now, if a man left his community with 25 cows and he came back with 26 cows, he had to say how he got it. The community, how did we know you got 25? How you come back? Then he will explain, well, you know, I lent one to such and such a person at a wedding and so on, he give you back, but you got to prove it. But the community, you were accountable in the community. So that's how they dealt with any social deal. There was no prison. And we mobilized our communities. People sat under the trees, the Palava system, the Cabellas. People sat under the trees and in the community. And the community participated in the decisions that impact their lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the African tradition. Africa was practicing participatory or direct democracy centuries.
Yeah, centuries before.
The Greeks.
Yeah.
And then you're telling us about democracy as a war thing. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Aristotle was taught by the Egyptians.
That's right. But Africa had this democratic tradition, and they had no political parties. There was no political parties. And you mobilize your people. The political party was a colonial imposition.
Good evening to all of you who are joining us. I see my friend Basil Butcher, who's my cricket part of my cricket team. He is here tonight. Good evening to all of you. Of course, many of you are saying that this is a very fruitful discussion here. Pan-Africanism, of course, we became Pan-Africanists when they put us on those ships. Then we became Métis, which is where the term Mati come from.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
We become Mati, and so Pan-Africanism as a movement. Yes, and it became Pan-Africanism really as an organized movement. Only begun at the turn of the 20th century. The Pan-Africanist meeting in Manchester, organized by Sylvester Williams from Trinidad.
Yeah.
And think Du Bois was, of course, there, and
W.B. Du Bois, yeah.
Du Bois would make his color line statement.
Yeah.
So that the issue in the 20th century would be the issue
It's
of the color line,
line, that's right.
and then Du Bois held a series of Pan-African meetings,
Yeah.
and then we got to 1944. And with the Pan-African meeting again in Manchester. So you're right, Gerald. It's not so much an ideology,
Yeah,
but it's really a calling to the action of the different African nations.
Nations, that's right.
Nation.
Yeah.
That is why what's his name, Peter Tosh, was so prophetic.
That's
then he
right.
said, wherever you come from, so long as you are a black man, you are an African.
That's right.
Right.
That's
so
right.
It's a really call to action,
That's
and
right.
people get black nationalism.
Yeah.
Is of course related to Pan-Africanism, but one can talk about black nationalism as an ideology. But our black nationalism is not a linear black nationalism. You get a little bit of black socialism. You get a little bit of black multiracialism.
Yeah.
You get a little bit of what they now call black liberalism.
It's not ethnic chauvinism either.
It's not ethnic chauvinism.
No.
It is not ethnic
Our detractors like to refer to us black nationalists and this and all. Well, I know what black nationalism is. So if they refer to me as a black nationalist, I'm proud of that.
Yeah. You know, Gerald, to this day, in my village, Buxton, to this day, when they say Kuli, they look, oh Jesus Christ, be careful. Be careful, Twilly. They taught us to say Indo-Guyanese. To this day, they tease me with that.
Yeah.
When they say Kuli wrong, me they look wrong. You know, because we come out of that black power tradition, that people's power tradition that says to them, look, these are Indian Guyanese. They're not Kuli people. Yeah. Right? And to this day, they just look around when they say Kuli.
Yeah, and the word Kuli was originally used to describe Chinese laborers, you know.
That's right. Or Irish
before
people.
It was long before.
Irish people were called, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, the
right.
niggers or the coolies of Europe and so on.
Yeah.
Right. You know, Gerald.
But you know, David, I just wanted to say, because last time when I had technical problems joining the program.
Yeah.
You were talking about 1763.
1763, that's where I was going with you now.
Yeah. From my reading of 1763, so that for ideological, reasons, so I see 1763 not as something that just happened and it's over. For me, I believe in carrying on. I believe in the idea, the concept of revolutionary continuity. Because what those revolutionaries fought for, people like us, we have to carry forward. We have to carry that struggle forward. We are carrying that struggle forward. I think it was Walter Rodney who said, history is like a relay race. The baton is passed on. And I would like to see myself as fighting in the tradition of all those revolutionaries of 1763. Kofi, Akabre, and Atta. From my reading and so, I have a special place in my heart for Atta. But that's another thing. And I don't know if you can recall, many years ago, there were two historians, two dailies, Verity Daily
and PH Daily.
And PH Daily that used to write a column on the Lucian.
Right.
Lucian, yes.
I
know PH Daily well. I knew him well. And I was, of course, a young man then, very young. And he wrote, this was the first person that actually brought out a book on coffee. I don't know if you recall that book. He wrote about coffee. And for some reason, I think President Barnum picked up on it.
Yes.
And this thing with coffee can become the national hero.
Right.
But something was happening later on too. Because with the differences with the WPA and Barnum and the PNC then, there were some people, because I know this, who were saying, well, look, we had this thing already, Coffee had to come up against the ultra leftists. They after them. This is how some, I know what I'm telling you. So Burnham and them were seen as the people who were advancing making this revolution. And then you got the types who were like Atta.
Right.
Ultra left.
Yeah. No surrender. No surrender.
Yes, no surrender. Yeah, they want to destroy. But I think when you really look at what happened, and so I don't know this woman, I'm going to get a copy of her book. But when I think I read Alvin Thompson, I read Nigel Westmore's pieces, David Granger and them, and so, but something we need to get. I got this soft spot, something for Atta. I saw Atta as, I think Atta understood. I think Atta realized that this man Van Hogenheim was delaying,
cocking them. Yes,
cocking them, and he realized that, and the rest is history. But
yeah. But Gerald, you're making a profound point there, eh? Because we are still dealing with the issues of 1763.
Yes,
right. Here was Kofi being pragmatist.
Yes.
Being pragmatist and said, look, I mean, we're operating in a global political economy, right?
Yes.
And if we are going to be an independent state, first of all, we got to share this thing with them Dutch people, right? We got to operate with trade and so. He was being pragmatic. Atta, on the other hand, was saying you have to make a clean break.
Yes.
Fast forward to independence, right?
Right.
The Burnhams and the Williams and them are saying, boy, we got to live within this global capitalist system and we got to find a way to survive in this thing. And their sons and daughters, the Rodneys and so on, are saying, no, you have to make a clean break with capitalism and imperialism. Right?
Well said, well put, yep.
Right?
Yes.
Fast forward to today.
Yes.
There are others who are saying, boy, Exxon is here.
Yes.
We can't fight Exxon in a certain way. We got to try to get as much as what we get. And then there are others who are saying, renegotiate the contract or close down the aisle. Don't expand the aisle. Chase out Exxon. Those issues are existential issues.
Correct.
That our society has dealt with from the time of 1763.
1763.
To the present.
To the present.
To the present. So, of course, I have a soft spot for Atta.
Yes.
But as I grow older, I learn more, I come to understand what Kofi was driving
up against.
I fought against Burnham, as you know. We negotiated viciously. But I think as one becomes
we can see the strengths of both and the weaknesses.
Exactly. And I think that we in Guyana and the Caribbean are only going to move forward when we are able to bridge the gap between those two tendencies.
Yes.
That are always there. Those tendencies will always
be there. Yeah.
I mean, people like myself and yourself, right? After all our notes when it comes to imperialism.
You're right, David. You're right. China had it. China had it with Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And we are in that battle now.
Yes.
How to be as pragmatic as we can.
Yeah.
Because we are dealing with two extremes. The Indian capitalist extreme that is saying, give the white people whatever they want so that we can hold on to control of this place here. Then you have the radicals who are saying, close down the aisle because Exxon thinking us. And somewhere in the middle there, the pragmatism has to become a living organism, all right? Where we try to recognize that we live in a world, David Rudder said, we live in a world that don't need islands no more. All right. And we are still islands, not islands in the physical sense, but in the ideological sense.
Yes.
We are still islands, and we have to survive in this hostile world that is not less hostile than the period of slavery. It's now more hostile.
More hostile,
because a sophisticated kind of slavery and enslavement of our people. And my problem with Jack Dio and Orphan and them is their lack of grounding in history doesn't really speak to them and say, the road you all are going down is a road we have traveled before.
Correct.
From the period of enslavement. I do not believe that Jack Dio and Orphan get up in the morning and say, we want to enslave black people. I think they get up in the morning and say that we want to control Guyana. But in the pursuit of control, because of the lack of grounding in history, especially history that predated
and the system is rigged. The system is rigged.
That's right. That's right. It's taking them down a road of modern day enslavement, and they don't appreciate how dangerous is it. Now, my problem with Ravi and them is that Ravi understand. Ravi Dev understands history. Ravi Dev understands that what the Indian captains are doing is not sustainable. He understands it. I don't think those other guys understand or they care. Right? They're ahistorical. The political upbringing was bad. They didn't read the so-called classics. They have no sense of Guyana history, Caribbean history. And so therefore they're taking us down a dangerous road. But those of us who still are here to tell the story because of the history that has been passed down to us are warning them. You're going down the dangerous road. Rather than them know that dangerous road. And
this is a captured state. This is a classic. The Guyana, when you look at Guyana today, it's a case of typical neo-colonial outpost. It's a neo-colonial outpost.
Yes. And people like Nkrumah spotted that neo-colonialism. Very early. Neo-colonialism, the final stage, the last stage of imperialism, very early. And he understood that. And Burnham understood it too. This independence that we have, that this independence we gain is this formal independence, what we call flag and anthem independence. Is meaningless if you don't have economic independence, if you don't have control over your wealth, your natural resources. And we are at a dangerous place. I mean,
very dangerous.
We are talking about the immigrants coming into Guyana. For some people, it's a way to win elections. For others, this country may well be taken away from us. Venezuela may not have to fire a shot. Just send their people here. And we as immigrants ourselves can't chase them and say, you all are immigrants, don't come here. All right? So I am not anti-immigration. I don't believe that we should send back people to Venezuela or Brazil or whatever the case may be. But we have to be very careful not to play politics with it.
But David, I've done a lot on the Venezuelan situation is a it's very complicated, a very complex situation, I don't know if you noticed, have you ever been to Venezuela?
Yes.
Well, I can recall the first time I went to Venezuela was a conference at the Central University of Caracas in the 80s. And one of the things I noticed on arrival at Simon Bolivar Airport was the invisibility of black people in Africa. I didn't see any at the tellers changing money or books or nothing. The only time I saw Africans was when I went into the washroom.
Right.
Move aside when you come to brush it. And then as we were driving, you're going down into the city, right into central Caracas, you see all these shanty tongues and things and so. But you had two major parties, COPEI, the Christian Democrats, and the Social Democrats, under Andres Perez and so. And the oil wealth in Venezuela is just a tiny minority benefited from it. And Africans in Venezuela and indigenous people of Venezuela were in the margins. That changed when Chavez came about.
Yeah.
Now, Do you know for all the years Venezuela had diplomatic relations with Guyana, there was not one black ambassador? Venezuela sent, I met the woman, her tour of duty was up and she left. Dr. Martinez, she had a PhD in international relations, a black woman who was the ambassador Venezuela to Guyana. The present ambassador is not white. He's brown skin, or we want to call him, but you can see the African, right? The head of the Venezuelan ground forces, the head for the Venezuelan ground forces is an African Venezuelan. And if you look at the demonstrations in the street that is against Maduro and the Bolivar revolution, you will be hard pressed to find Africans, because what is going on in Venezuela is not just class, it's race.
It's also race. It's also
race.
It's also race.
And you will notice a lot of the Venezuelans who are here are not even, you're not seeing many. I'm not saying that you don't have one or two, but you don't see many African Venezuelans.
Many Africans, yes. That's a very interesting point. I remember when the very Venezuela, when I went to Colombia and when I went to Ecuador.
Yeah, race is a very race and class, a powerful.
You got to go in the bathroom to find black people. That thing.
No, you don't see that in Venezuela.
Yeah.
Venezuelan ambassadors to Africa and all of that are African Venezuelans.
Yeah. Cuba itself.
Yeah.
Cuba itself had to go through, deal with that race thing in the 1980s.
Yes.
Fidel had to introduce the quota system.
Look at Brazil. For years, we have had diplomatic relations with Brazil. I've never seen an African Brazilian as ambassador in this country.
Yep. And the largest,
and they have the second largest concentration of black people after Nigeria.
That's right.
Yeah.
Gerald Pereira here, we've been talking about race, class, nation, politics, narratives, thought, quite a wide-ranging conversation as it has to be. I continue to say that given the experience of African people, our conversations cannot be narrow. We have had our contacts with other ethnic groups in different circumstances, whether it is with our indigenous brothers and sisters, where our relations have been mixed, our Indian brothers and sisters, again, mixed, our thing with white people, less mixed. But because of the experiences of black people, going right back to so-called antiquity, if you go back to the period of antiquity and you see the relationship with Christianity, the relationship with Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, the people he had around him were black people. And you know, one of my students asked me last week, he said, Dr. Hines, where can I find this black story in the Bible? And I sang for him, bring back Maccabee version.
Yeah, well, there's a very good book edited by the African Heritage Bible.
Yes.
That was put together by a black theologian, liberation theologian, he passed on, from the United States.
Right. Michael Gomez made mention of him because I'm using Gomez's work in my class on Africana Studies.
And then you have books like God of the Oppressed by James Cone, Black Liberation Theology, Pan-African Liberation Theology by Young. Because you see, the problem, David, is, people, African spirituality, when you speak African spirituality, people jump. The religion can be seen as the container, the bottle, and the spirituality is the content.
There you go.
Because the Africans, you see, this thing about religion, and the word religion, which are really Greek, is something that the Africans had a holistic view of life. So your religion wasn't something separate from your economics, the way you organize the economy, or your politics. The religion, if you want to say that, was the foundation of your politics, your economics, the way you structure your society. So your economics and your politics was spiritually infused.
There you go.
That is why you can have such a moral philosophy as Ubuntu.
That's right. Plenty God.
That's why someone like Mandela can walk out of prison, suffered all those years, and be so forgiven.
Exactly.
That points to the moral superiority of African spirituality and thought.
Right. And even today in our country, our elders, our mothers, they call themselves spiritualists.
Yes.
Spiritualists, them spiritual people. It has lived to this day. Gerald, thank you very much. We'll have to do this as a regular I have a Trinidadian.
And David, since we not just forget what they do, don't forget the African believe if God is divine and we are created by him, then we are divine too.
That's right. That's
we have that divinity within us. Yeah,
that's Garvey's story. Right? Garvey said, God make me his own image when I watch myself in the mirror.
That's right.
I see a black man. God got me black. Black man, where is your God?
That's
Marcus Messiah Garvey, the man who predicted that a king shall rise in the east. And in 1930, when Emperor Selassie
was where I'm sitting, you can't sit, but I have a huge thing of him here. That's me.
Right.
And this is his latest. This is the latest edition with the thing.
Yes.
And David, last but not least, Black Power is not something of yesterday. The struggle for Black Power continues. It continues. Yeah.
No. Rodney said that what we are calling Black Power today in the 20th century goes back to Garvey.
That's right.
It goes back to Garvey. Dr. King acknowledged that.
Yes.
Dr. King, who is a black liberal, acknowledged Garvey as the father of modern Black Power. You know, and thing. I was telling some of my Kenyan students who are wearing dreadlocks. I said, you all know where the dreadlock story come from. I said, well, Jamaica. I said, yeah, it's Jamaican. But it's Jamaican see the Mau Mau rebels fighting. They see the movie. They see them fighting with Martin Air in the 1950s.
Bidan Kemati.
And they used to bring the movies, they bring them in Jamaica.
Yes.
And that's where Jamaicans saw that, the Rastafarians saw that, and adopted it as their locks.
That's right.
The origins of the locks is Kenya among the Mau Mau rebels. But Jamaicans are the one that gave meaning to it. My Kenyan students left with their mouth open. I said, well, that's why you all are in college, to learn not only about other people, but to learn about yourself. Because often...
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
Often we are taught we know more about the world than we know about ourselves because of the colonial empire story, you know. I remember coming to America decades ago, and I could tell my American classmates the difference between Washington, D.C. and Washington State.
Yeah.
A lot of them didn't know it, but we knew it because we were part of empire. Right?
Yes.
We were part of empire. And so we had a sense of the world more than a sense of ourselves. But we are correcting that now. We are correcting that now. Because
when you mention Hegel, I'll tell you, you know, David, I had an experience on Fridays. These guys, a number of them, they used to get together at a place, they go for beer and drink and so. And I went in the place, and you got some of them are university lecturers, professors with PhD in history and so. So we'll have the discussion on philosophy and so. And here I am as a black man talking about Hegel and Marcuse and Immanuel Kant and all of this. And they love the discussion. But then one day, it went in another direction. And I said to them, by the way, I said, any one of you gentlemen read Kwame Nkrumah Conscientism? They said not. I said, what about Walter Rodney? And I mentioned Walter Rodney and one historian. He said, no. I said, gentlemen, that's racism. They said, what are you talking about? I said, look, I am sitting here with you and we are talking about all these white philosophers and you're quite comfortable because I know it. That's okay. But you have not seen it fit and proper to read any third world, they didn't know. They haven't. None of them read. These were people who were teaching history, but yet they did not read any third world thinker.
There you go. There you go. There
Right.
you go.
So you bring out a book with the title of the book is 50 Top Philosophers of the World. Right? And not one black man make it in the 50.
Yeah.
Out of the 50, they had about 40 Europeans. And then they included, I think, one or two Mencius Chinese. And then they had Rabindranath Tagore, Sri Aurobindo, and some others. But there was no, and I took the book, I said, this is racist. When you can have, you people the European constitute 19% of humanity. And yet you bring out a book with 50 top philosophers in the world, and a black man and make the 50 in the 50. That's racism. You see how complex racism is. Not somebody walking in and calling David Hines a nigger or Gerald Pereira or no. It's very sophisticated. So if you're looking for the type somebody ain't got, and this is where I find some of these who are spinning the Indian narrative very dangerous, because some of them know, as you pointed out, Mr. Dev is well read. When you read what he writes, you know that he's well read. But then I know what direction headed.
Exactly.
You know, it is much sophisticated. It's not the crude narrative. It's very, and you have that in Britain. You have the skinheads who used to walk around like the Steve Lawrence, looking for Steve Lawrence, walk up to him and stab him and kill him. Right? Or walk into and beat up the BNP, the crew type. Then you have the most sophisticated types. Right? They don't believe in sending you like body bags back. They say, listen. We know what they did y'all, but we want y'all out. You can go back. You know?
Yes.
And the argument is more sophisticated. It's not the jackboot, the Nazi in big boots against swastika. These guys
are Gerald Pereira here.
But racist to the core.
Gerald, thank you very much. My sister, who visited Africa for the first time, and she went into the dungeons, what they call it, the place of no return. And she said when she went in there, she saw Walter Rodney's book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, is one of the books they have there. She screamed. She screamed, and she said, Walter Rodney is from my country. And my brother knew Walter Rodney, and he was part of it. Our daughters there.
David, have you ever been there to Ghana?
No, I've never been there.
Well, there is one in Gori when you go to the one in Senegal.
Yes, she went to both.
And the one in Ghana. When you go there, you will cry.
Yes. So I notice I have a lot of Senegalese who are now following me, and some of them come onto these programs. And I got a call from a radio station in Uganda the other day to do a program on African Marxism and socialism. And he said he got my contact from somebody in Senegal who my sister met when she went there and so on. So, I mean, a small world, but my sister is not political in that sense. But when she saw Walter Rodney's book in that dungeon, she almost passed out. You know, it shows the power of identity. If she didn't realize then that Guyana had given this world many gifts, if she didn't realize before then, she realized it now. Thank you very much, Gerald. And I was saying that I have a Trinidadian friend who will say, please make this a regular occurrence. So we're going to make it a regular occurrence.
Okay, my brother.
Thanks a lot, my brother.
Yes, same to you. Thanks, David, for having me. Stay strong. Black Power.
That's right, Black Power. And to you, the audience, you all are so wonderful. You all stay through 2 hours of this story. And that is why I have faith. I have faith in you all. I have faith. And I'm saying, jump high, jump low. We can put Guyana back to the place where at independence we wanted it to be. And that is what the old people call the straight and narrow. They had a vision coming out of that slave plantation, coming out of the indentureship, Lord Jesus. They had a vision of where they wanted to take our country. And it's not the vision, not the vision that these people are taking us. And like I said, the Jack Dios and the Erfanales, they're operating out of ignorance. But the ignorance should not be an excuse for what they're doing, because every stupid man gets his own sense. And they want to take our country down the road of domination. And domination in a place like Guyana is not just dominating another party, it's dominating another group. It's dominating a big class of people, dominating a big race of people, and maybe more than one race. And that is why these guys are dangerous. And our friends Ravi Dev and them who know better, they are cheering them on, because the one thing they have in common, Ravi Dev, I don't think have very much in common with Jack Dio and them beyond the domination thing. For them, Black people are out to dominate them, and so they must dominate Black people before Black people dominate them. It's a very dangerous and subtle thing, but that's what we are fighting against. We have always been called to fight against domination, whether it's the domination of the slave plantation, the domination of the colonial era, the domination of the neo-colonial era. We have always been called to fight back. And once again, we've got to put our country on the straight and narrow way. This oil story is big. This oil story is big. And we don't want to go down the road of trouble. We don't want to go down the road of trouble. Trouble will not benefit anyone. But we also will not stand idly by and allow people to trouble us. Chaos in order and order in chaos. My Marxist friend, like my brother Rohit Kanai, will say it's a dialectics. You all think I don't know the little Marxism? It's the dialectics. We have to navigate the order in chaos. We don't want trouble, but we also will not stand for people troubling us. Chaos in order, order in chaos. So said Professor Rex Nettleford. The Marxists call it dialectics. We've been dialecting long before them, because we had to survive on that plantation, even as we try to beat the plantation. Survival and beat. Sparrow said, every time I try to escape, I think about the Englishman, they really dog and he whip, but a planning a brilliant escape. We always dialecting. Marx didn't have to teach us dialectics. Hegel didn't have to teach us dialectics. We've been dialecting long before them. Our contribution to the world history, that is why we are what we are, and that's the way it's going to be. You can't educate I for no equal opportunity. Talking about my freedom, my people's freedom, that's what I'm talking about. Brother Robert, Nestor, Marley, again, until tomorrow night. You all get me going. And this by Gerald Pereira, he get me going. But anyhow, I got to go. You all gone, and you all got to go to, oh Jesus, Sherrod Khan. So you all got to go straight to Mark. Tomorrow night, same time, same place.